It lasts less than a second. A small rectangle of plastic lifted toward a terminal. A pause so short it barely exists. A faint green light, and then that flat synthetic chime. The one you have heard 10,000 times and never once actually listened to. The coffee is yours. The transaction is finished before your hand has even reached the cup. You did not think about any of it. That is the point. You were never supposed to. Now imagine that this time something else happens. The moment the terminal glows green, a single dollar appears in your account. Not taken, added. One clean, weightless dollar arriving out of nowhere for the simple act of touching plastic to glass. Most people hearing this feel the same small spark. A quiet, involuntary calculation runs somewhere behind the eyes. How many times do I tap in a day? How much could I make? How fast could I do it? That spark is the most human thing about you, and it is about to lead you somewhere you would not have chosen to go. Most people assume the answer is obvious. Free money, a small, harmless miracle. You would tap a little more, smile a little more, and the world would carry on exactly as before. That is not what happens, because the first thing the dollar does is not make you richer. The first thing it does is change you. Watch yourself in those opening hours. You stop buying things in one purchase. You buy them in 5. The full shopping cart becomes 5 small ones. The single tap becomes a ritual you stretch out, item by item, each touch of the card releasing that quiet chime, that quiet dollar. You are not being greedy. You are being rational. The system asked you a question, and you are simply answering it correctly. And this is the first uncomfortable truth the experiment reveals. You always believed your behavior was driven by what you wanted. It was driven by what you were rewarded for. Change the reward, and the wanting rearranges itself around it, silently, instantly, without ever asking your permission. By the second day, you are not really shopping anymore. You are tapping. Now widen the lens, because it was never going to be only you. The neighbor sees it, the coworker hears about it. The stranger in line behind you watches your card touch the terminal 11 times for a single sandwich and understands everything in an instant. Within days, the behavior spreads. Not because anyone announced it, but because no one had to. A free dollar does not need depth marketing. It needs only to be witnessed. And here the scene changes completely. The streets fill with people performing the same strange new prayer. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Lines stop moving, terminals overheat. Engineers somewhere watch transaction volumes climb a vertical wall that should not exist on any chart they have ever built. Researchers studying human behavior already know what they are looking at, because they have seen it in miniature 100 times. Give a system a loophole, and it does not get exploited slowly. It gets exploited at the speed of human cleverness, which is to say, almost instantly and almost without limit. But none of that is the real problem. The real problem is a question that almost no one stops to ask, because the dollar feels so light, so clean, so free. Where is it coming from? Follow the dollar backward. It appeared in your account. Accounts are held by banks. So the simplest answer is the bank is paying you. Hold that thought for one moment and it collapses. A bank that hands a dollar to every customer for every tap while millions of people tap thousands of times a day is not running a promotion. It is signing its own death certificate, one chime at a time. No institution survives paying out infinitely for an action that costs nothing to perform. The bank would be gone by lunch, so perhaps the government prints it. The state simply creates the dollars and lets them flow. This is where the fantasy quietly turns into something colder. Because if the dollars are conjured into existence, billions of them, then trillions, faster than anyone is producing anything real, then the number in your account grows while the thing the number is supposed to represent does not. More dollars chase the same bread, the same fuel, the same roof over your head, and prices begin to climb, not gently. They climb the way the transaction graph climbed, vertically. Within weeks, your dollar buys a coffee. Then it buys a sip. Then it buys nothing at all. You did receive a dollar every time you tapped. The promise was kept. Perfectly, to the letter. It simply stopped meaning anything. And the haunting part is that the money did not fail despite being free. It failed because it was free. This is the moment the experiment stops being a fantasy and becomes a mirror. Because here's the detail almost everyone misses, the one that turns curiosity into something closer to vertigo. The thing you just imagined, money appearing from nowhere, created by a gesture, conjured faster than the real world can keep up, is not a hypothetical. It is a description of how money already works. We tell ourselves a comforting story about money, that somewhere deep in a vault there is gold, that each dollar is a claim on something solid, something you could touch, something that was mined and weighed and locked away. We picture money as a thing. It is not a thing. It has not been a thing for a very long time. The vast majority of the money in the modern world was never printed, never minted, never held. It exists only as numbers in databases, and those numbers are not moved from one place to another when they are created. They are simply typed into existence. When a commercial bank grants a loan, it does not reach into a drawer of pre-existing deposits and lend them out. Central banks have stated this plainly in their own published research, in language that should unsettle anyone who reads it carefully. The act of lending creates the money. The deposit does not fund the loan conjures the deposit, a keystroke. And new money exists where a moment before there was none. Read that again, slowly, and feel the floor tilt. The miracle you imagined, a dollar appearing from nothing at the press of a finger, is happening right now, at enormous scale, every single day. The only difference between your fantasy and reality is who is allowed to press the button. It was never you. And in the rare moments when the system shakes, the button gets pressed harder than most people will ever fully grasp. When economies have stood on the edge of collapse, central banks have summoned money into being in quantities that have no physical analog. Trillions of units created not by labor, not by mining, not by manufacturing, but by decision. A choice executed as a keystroke, rippling outward through the entire structure of human life. Mortgages, wages, pensions, the price of bread in a town you have never visited. None of it was backed by gold. All of it was backed by something far stranger and far more fragile. It was backed by belief. The dollar in your pocket is worth a dollar for one reason and one reason only. Because everyone around you has agreed to behave as though it is. The paper is worthless. The metal is worthless. The number in the database is worthless. The agreement is everything. Money is not a substance. It is a shared act of faith performed by billions of strangers who will never meet, sustained moment to moment by the quiet assumption that everyone else will keep believing too. And the experiment you imagined, $1 per tap, was never really a question about money. It was a stress test on the belief. This is the truth the fantasy was hiding all along. The thing that gives a dollar its value is not that it exists. It is that it is scarce, that you cannot simply will it into being. The instant everyone can create money for free, money stops being money. The fantasy contains the seed of its own destruction because the very wish, let me make a dollar from nothing, is the wish for a world in which dollars are worth nothing. You wanted to break the rule. But the rule was never a cage. The rule was the only thing holding the value up. Scarcity is not the cruelty of the system. Scarcity is the system. So return now to where this began, the terminal, the plastic, the faint green light, the flat little chime you have heard 10,000 times and never once really listened to. You always thought of it as nothing, a formality, the boring closing punctuation on a purchase you had already stopped thinking about. But look closer at what actually happened in that fraction of a second. A number moved, a claim was honored, a merchant you have never spoken to trusted a bank you do not work for to vouch for a debt you may not have fully settled, and the entire invisible architecture of human cooperation held silently, perfectly, in less time than it takes to blink. Billions of strangers in that instant kept their unspoken promise to one another. You imagined getting $1 every time you tapped, but you already received something every single time, something far stranger than a dollar, something you have never once noticed. With every tap, the world quietly confirms, again and again and again, that the collective fiction still holds, that the belief has not yet cracked, that everyone is, for one more moment, still pretending together. The real miracle was never that the tap might pay you. It is that the tap works at all, and the only thing standing between that quiet green light and a world where it suddenly means nothing is something no vault can hold, no government can print, and no terminal can verify. It is the agreement, and it is more fragile than you have ever allowed yourself to imagine.